Good morning. I hope this Friday morning finds you well and blessed. We know these are tough times, but we pray that you would have known God's presence with you in the days that have gone past this week. We know that God is with us, and we know that from His Word. And so we turn to His Word, and we turn to a story where His disciples are caught in a storm, caught in difficulty, but yet Jesus is with them, and He protects them and blesses them. So we turn to Mark 4, verses 34 to 41. Mark 4, verses 34 to 41. I'll pause for a moment and allow you to read these verses for yourselves. And as you've read those verses, let me draw your attention to verses 40 and 41 of the chapter, where Jesus said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear, and said to one another, "Who is this, that even the wind and the seas obey him?" Fear is one of the themes that dominates our passage today, but it's not the central point. But I wonder, when was the last time you were genuinely scared? I mean, terrified, really afraid for your life. Do you remember what it felt like? Do you remember who or what you turned to for help? When I was younger, I did a bit of traveling for a year, and during that time I had some really great adventures. But I remember two times distinctly where I felt genuinely afraid. The first was whenever I went cage diving with great white sharks in South Africa, and there was a slight malfunction with my cage. Thankfully, the sharks were on the other side of the boat, so nothing dangerous happened. The other occasion whenever I felt genuinely scared and helpless was whenever we were caught in slightly rough seas traveling between islands in Fiji. Now, you must remember that I can't swim, and so that's why I really felt scared on this occasion. It wasn't just the fear of seeing my breakfast from earlier again. There we were, stuck in the middle of the sea. The waves looked as if they could come over the boat at any stage, that our little raft might be swamped at any moment. I hunkered down, closed my eyes, and prayed. And thankfully, we got to the next island okay. Now, in our story today, the seas are much rougher than the ones that I encountered. They're nothing compared to the storm described in our passage today. In verse 37, we're told that the waves were breaking into the boat, so the boat was already filling. So this was not just choppy waters. This was the sort of storm that these tried and tested fishermen led them to be scared and to cry out to Jesus for help. They were terrified. However, the focus, as I said, of our passage isn't on the size of the storm or on the depth of the disciples' fear. Mark's focus, as always, is upon Jesus. And he once again directs us to consider, who is Jesus? And here we see Jesus' authority again displayed. Jesus is the Son of God, the one whom the wind and the seas obey. Mark wants his readers to know the greatness of Christ. Go back to the passage and see how he uses the word great in verses 37, 39, and 41. So in our passage today, and in the passages that follow in the next few times we'll study together, we see that Jesus displays his expanding range of power over every sphere of creation. Power over the laws and forces of nature, power over the spiritual and dynamic world, and power over human illness and death. Jesus is God, the eternal Son, come in flesh. Jesus is both the one who gets tired and falls asleep in the boat and the one who calms the storm with a word. The same voice that spoke the wind and seas into existence calls them to be still. And so, believers today, when we when we face storms of all sorts, we remember that what Mark is saying here. Jesus, the God man, is present with us in the storms, and so our focus must be upon him. As we journey through life, we do so with Jesus, who is fully human. Jesus' true humanity is shown in this passage in the fact that he has a brief sleep on the boat. He's tired after speaking and teaching all day. The one who we are called to trust and obey is the one who embraced all that it means to be human, except sin. So Jesus knows our troubles because he has experienced them completely and fully. He feels our pain, he knows our weakness, he understands our cries for help. He is our great high priest who knows and cares for us deeply. But Jesus is also fully God. Jesus possesses divine authority. He is the great one and the master over nature and the spiritual world. Jesus didn't merely quiet the sea, he rebuked the wind. Jesus addressed the raging storm as a force threatening both himself and his disciples. And this force is subdued by Jesus and his sovereign words of authority. Followers of Jesus will face storms knowing that nothing is impossible with God. He can cure and heal both physical illness and spiritual sickness. The storm of sin rising up in our lives can be calmed by his words. So we allow him to tame our passions and lusts, to quieten our rough and violent tendencies in word and thought, to bring peace to our troubled consciences. No one has to despair in this life if they bow humbly to Christ and trust him for the whole journey of faith. He is able and he is willing to save and keep us to the uttermost. He who is within us is greater than all that opposes us, even the remaining sin. And so, in the final verses, we also see that Jesus is patient with his people. He doesn't disown them in their time of need. Instead, he asks them why they're afraid. He is concerned for them and for their lack of faith. And while he addresses their fear, he also calls them to faith, to remember who he is and all that they've seen him do already. Remember, Jesus does not change. He is the same today. He is sympathizing with us, his followers today. He is interceding for his people eternally. However, we remember that the disciples' lack of understanding is a subplot in this story. Our focus is to be on Christ. Notice how this passage finishes in verse 41 with the focus again being on who Jesus is. The Son of God and fully human, sent to bring man to God. So, in these days, let us take great encouragement as followers of Jesus as we choose to remember who it is that we follow. The Creator, the triune God, the one who is in control over the whole universe. The power of the eternal Son guards and guides with complete reliability, even in life storms, even in the storms of this time. With Christ, we are in good, safe, loving hands, because he alone paid the price for our sinful rebellion. He has overcome sin and death, and he's united us to himself. In these truths, we see that all that happens to us comes from the hand of a loving, sovereignly gracious Father. He does everything for our good and for his glory. So, whatever these days bring, let us trust and obey. Let us keep our focus on Jesus, who is with us every day and in every way. God bless.